I never thought I'd miss the sound of her laugh. It used to fill every corner of our apartment, warm and soft, like something alive. Sarah had this way of making everything feel lighter, like the weight of the world didn't matter as long as she was there. We'd sit on the couch for hours, her legs curled under her, coffee mugs in hand, and talk about everything and nothing. Those nights felt endless. Perfect. But perfection doesn't last, does it? I still remember the last thing she said before she left. "You're not even trying anymore, Elliot. You just exist, and I can't keep pretending. That's enough." She was standing by the door, her bags already packed. I didn't say a word. What was there to say? She wasn't wrong. After she walked out, the silence in our apartment became unbearable. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the fridge, it all felt like a reminder that she wasn't there anymore. I stopped going home after work. Instead, I'd sit in my car or wander the streets, hoping the cold night air would numb something inside me. That's how I ended up at the Velvet Brew. I saw the job listing taped to the window. Late night barista wanted. Must follow the rules. It didn't matter what the job was. I needed something, anything, to fill the hours and keep my mind from spiraling. I walked in, filled out a quick form, and by the end of the week, I had a uniform and a shift schedule. The first thing they handed me wasn't an employee manual or a list of procedures. It was a single laminated card with 5 rules printed in bold black letters. Rule number 1, always serve drinks exactly as ordered. No substitutions, no mistakes. Rule number 2, never speak to customers unless spoken to first. Rule number 3, drinks must be served within exactly 5 minutes. No exceptions. Rule number 4, never thank customers for tips. Take the money without a word. Rule number 5, under no circumstances should you leave the cafe before midnight. Greg, the manager, made it clear these weren't suggestions. He was a wiry man with hollow eyes and a voice that never rose above a whisper. Follow the rules and you'll be fine. Break them, and you won't. Got it? I nodded, not entirely sure what I was agreeing to. At first, it seemed like any other night job. The cafe had this old-world charm. Wooden floors, dim lighting, and shelves lined with mismatched mugs. But something about it felt wrong. Too quiet. Too clean. The customers didn't talk much either. They'd walk in, place their order, and leave without lingering. The first week went by in a blur. I followed the rules to the letter, even though they felt absurd. Why couldn't we thank customers for tips? What difference did it make if an order took 6 minutes instead of 5? And who cared if I left at 11:55 instead of midnight? But the rules weren't about logic. They were about control. One night, I almost broke rule number 1. A guy ordered a black coffee, but I accidentally grabbed the wrong roast. I caught myself just before pouring it and fixed the mistake, but I swear I felt someone watching me the entire time. Not Greg, not the other staff, something else. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling until the man left, his coffee in hand. Rule number 3 was harder than I thought. 5 minutes sounds like plenty of time, but the clock above the counter felt like it was mocking me, each tick louder than the last. One night, I was seconds away from missing the mark when a customer leaned over the counter and whispered, "Careful, you're cutting it close." I don't know how they knew. The hardest part, though, was rule number 5. Midnight. It wasn't just a curfew. It felt like a boundary, a line I wasn't supposed to cross. One night, I finished cleaning early and thought about slipping out at 11:50. The door was just a few feet away, but when I reached for it, the lights flickered. A sudden, sharp noise echoed from the back room, like something heavy had fallen. I froze, my hand still on the handle, and waited until the clock struck 12 before I moved again. By the end of my second week, the rules weren't just guidelines. They were ingrained in me. Every action, every word, every thought was measured against them. I didn't question them anymore. Until last night. Last night, I broke one. It was rule number 1. The simplest one. The one that should have been impossible to screw up. But I did. A woman walked in just before closing, her heels clicking against the floor as she approached the counter. She looked tired, her hair damp from the rain, but her voice was sharp and deliberate. 1 latte. No foam. I nodded, punching it into the register without looking up. The cafe was empty, and the clock read 11:45. I just needed to get through the next 15 minutes. I steamed the milk, poured the espresso, and handed her the cup. That's when I noticed it. Foam. A light layer of it, clinging to the top like a taunt. I froze. She stared at the drink, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at me, her eyes dark and unblinking. "This isn't what I ordered," she said softly. Her voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Too calm. My throat tightened. I wanted to say I'd fix it, but the words wouldn't come. My hands trembled as I reached for the cup, but she pulled it back, cradling it like it was something precious. "No need," she said, her lips curling into a faint smile. "It's already done." She turned and walked out the door, the bell above it jingling softly. I stared after her. The foam in her drink burned into my memory like a scar. The silence that followed wasn't normal. It was heavy, oppressive. And then, the clock stopped ticking. At first, I thought it was broken, but when I glanced at it, the second hand was hovering between 2 numbers, trembling as if stuck. The lights flickered, dimming until the cafe was bathed in a sickly yellow glow. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not hers. These were heavier, slower, coming from the back room. "Greg?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just on the other side of the swinging door. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a metal spoon, and edged toward the door. My heart was pounding so loudly, I could barely hear anything else. When I pushed the door open, there was nothing there. Just the empty storage room, the shelves neatly lined with coffee beans and paper cups. But something felt wrong. The air was colder, and the smell, normally sweet and earthy, had turned sour. I turned back to the counter, and that's when I saw them. The other baristas, Greg, Anna, and Liam, standing in a row behind the counter, their faces blank. They weren't supposed to be here. Greg always left before my shift, and Anna and Liam never worked nights. "Guys?" I said, my voice shaking. They didn't answer. They just stared at me, their eyes glassy and distant. Then Greg spoke, his voice flat and lifeless. "You broke a rule, Elliot." I backed away, my hands shaking. "It was a mistake. I'll fix it. There is no fixing it," Anna said, stepping forward. Her movements were jerky, unnatural. "You were warned." Liam tilted his head, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You should have left it alone." The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in around me. I bolted for the door, but the moment I reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. The clock above it was frozen at 11:59, the second hand still trembling. The lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness for a moment, before coming back on. When they did, the others were gone. But the woman, the one with the latte, was standing in the middle of the cafe, her drink still in hand. She looked at me, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You broke the rule," she said, her voice soft but full of weight. "And now you'll understand why they exist." I didn't wait for her to explain. I ran, vaulting over the counter and heading for the back door. It was unlocked, but when I pushed it open, I found myself back in the cafe. The clock was still frozen. The woman was still standing there. And the drink in her hand was now overflowing, the foam spilling over the edge like it was alive, thick and viscous. "You can't leave," she said, stepping closer. "Not until it's done." I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed. But then I remembered rule number 5. Never leave before midnight. Midnight was my only chance. I forced myself to move, running back to the counter and grabbing the nearest mug. I pretended to make a drink, my hands fumbling with the machine. The clock's second hand was still stuck, but I whispered to myself, over and over, "Just get to midnight." The woman watched me, her expression unreadable as I worked, and then finally, the second hand twitched. 12 a.m. The lights flickered one last time, and when they came back, she was gone. The foam, the footsteps, the frozen clock, everything was back to normal. But I wasn't. I'm not sure I ever will be. The rules exist for a reason, and I'll never break them again. The clock struck midnight, and for a moment, I thought I was safe. The lights stopped flickering, the oppressive air lifted, and the cafe seemed to exhale a breath it had been holding. I slumped against the counter, my body trembling, relief flooding in. But the relief didn't last. The doorbell chimed. I froze. No one was supposed to come in after midnight. That wasn't a rule, but it was something Greg had drilled into me. Midnight meant the doors locked automatically. The woman with the latte was back. Her cup was empty now, but she held it in her hands like it still contained something precious. She walked to the counter, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor, and set the cup down with a deliberate clink. "You stayed," she said, her voice soft and calm. "That's good." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt like it had closed, and my legs were frozen in place. She tilted her head, studying me. "Do you know why the rules exist?" I shook my head, my voice finally breaking through. "Number." But I didn't mean to break them. It was a mistake. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mistakes have consequences, Elliot. That's why we have rules. To keep the balance. To keep you safe." Safe? I wanted to laugh, but the weight of her words pressed down on me like a vice. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "This place isn't just a cafe. It's a test, a filter. People come here thinking they're getting a job or a drink, but it's more than that. It's a choice. Obey the rules, and you'll walk out the other side changed. Break them." Her smile widened, sharp and cold. "And you become part of the system." I didn't understand. None of it made sense. But then, as if reading my thoughts, she gestured toward the counter, toward the row of empty uniforms hanging neatly on the hooks behind it. "Do you think Greg and the others just leave at the end of their shifts?" she asked. "They're here. Always. Bound by the rules they broke. Bound to this place." I shook my head, backing away. "No, that's not... They're just employees. They were employees," she corrected. "And now they enforce the rules, just like you will." "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. "No, I didn't mean to." She stepped back, her form flickering like a mirage, her voice echoing around me. "You broke the rules, Elliot, and the cafe doesn't forgive." The lights flickered one last time, plunging the room into darkness. When they came back on, the cafe was empty. No customers, no woman, no sound but the faint hum of the espresso machine. And then I felt it, the weight of the apron in my hands. It wasn't mine. It was heavier, older, the fabric worn and frayed. My name was stitched into it now, the thread dark and uneven. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. The windows showed nothing but a blank black void outside. The clock on the wall was gone. And when the bell over the door chimed, a new customer walked in. I forced a smile, the rules echoing in my mind like a mantra. "Welcome to the Velvet Brew. What can I get you?" The clock struck midnight. The lights flickered one last time before stabilizing, casting the cafe in an unnatural, sterile glow. My breath caught in my chest as the oppressive silence settled around me. I waited, frozen, for something, anything, to happen. The bell above the door chimed. I turned slowly, dread twisting in my gut. Standing there wasn't the woman or Greg, but a man I'd never seen before. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, and he wore an apron like mine, stained and frayed. He didn't speak. He simply stared at me, his presence filling the room like a dark cloud. I backed away, bumping into the counter, my hands fumbling for something, anything, that might protect me. "What do you want?" I managed to croak. He didn't answer. Instead, he raised one hand and pointed toward the back room. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I'm not going back there." The man didn't move, but the air in the cafe shifted, colder and heavier, pressing down on me until I couldn't breathe. The door to the back room creaked open, revealing only darkness. I didn't want to go, but my legs moved on their own, dragging me toward the gaping void. As I stepped through, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into total blackness. At first, there was nothing. No sound, no light, just the sensation of being watched. Then faint whispers began to fill the space, overlapping and growing louder until they were deafening. "You broke the rule. You didn't listen. You can't leave." I tried to cover my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside my head, clawing at my sanity. Then a single voice cut through the chaos, a voice I recognized. "Elliot." I turned toward the sound, and the darkness shifted, parting like a curtain. There she was, the woman with the latte, standing in front of me, her expression calm and unreadable. "You were given the rules for a reason," she said. "They are not arbitrary. They are not negotiable. They are your lifeline." "I didn't mean to break it," I pleaded. "It was an accident. Please just let me go." She tilted her head, considering me. "The cafe doesn't punish accidents, Elliot. It punishes carelessness. Rules exist to protect you, from this place, from what lies beyond it. I'll follow them," I promised, my voice cracking. "I'll never break them again." Her smile was faint, almost pitying. "You already broke them. There's only one way to make amends." Before I could respond, the darkness surged forward, engulfing her and everything else. I was alone again, but the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, angrier, until I couldn't take it anymore. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get out. The space twisted around me, endless and unyielding, until I saw it, the front door of the cafe. It was ajar, the faint glow of the streetlights spilling through. Freedom. I sprinted toward it, throwing myself through the opening. But instead of the street, I was back inside the cafe. The door slammed shut behind me, the clock above it ticking loudly. Midnight. The woman's voice echoed around me. "You don't escape the velvet brew, Elliot. You become part of it." The air shifted again, heavy with finality. I looked down and saw the apron in my hands, clean and new, with my name stitched neatly across the front. Greg's voice came from somewhere behind me, calm and resigned. "Welcome to the team." When I turned, he was standing with Anna and Liam, their faces blank, their eyes hollow. They were waiting for me, like I had always been meant to join them. The bell above the door chimed, and a new customer walked in. I put on the apron. "Welcome to the Velvet Brew," I said, my voice empty. "What can I get you?"